You put a cichlid and a betta in the same tank and somehow neither of them dies. You've seen it. Maybe you've lived it. Two fish that could absolutely destroy each other, sharing the same water, the same space, the same glass box, and yet they just don't. Not always, but more often than you'd expect. And the reason isn't what most people think. It's not luck. It's not temperament. It's something far more calculated, far more ancient, and honestly far stranger than anything you'd guess by just watching them swim. By the end of this video, you're going to look at your tank completely differently. Because what's happening inside that glass isn't chaos or peace. It's a negotiation. A constant, invisible negotiation using chemistry, hormones, social rank, and something that scientists are only beginning to fully understand. Let's get into it. Here's the first thing you need to know. Your tank is lying to you, not in a bad way. But the calm you see, the fish gliding past each other without tearing fins off, that calm isn't natural. It's engineered. And the first engineer is the environment itself. Here's what the research actually shows. A study by Oldfield in 2011 looked at Midas cichlids, one of the more aggressive freshwater species you can keep, and compared their behavior across 3 settings. A typical hobbyist tank under about 400 liters, a large artificial stream, and their natural crater lake habitat. In the small tank, chases and bites went through the roof. Same fish, same species, dramatically more violence just because the space was smaller and barer. But here's the part that surprises most owners. It wasn't just about size. When researchers added rocks and plants, real complexity, those same cichlids stopped making direct attacks. Instead, they switched to displays. Fin flaring, lateral showing, posturing. They were still communicating dominance, but they were doing it without drawing blood. The decor literally changed their decision-making. So when you look at your tank and wonder why your fish seem relatively peaceful, part of the answer is right there on the substrate. The hiding spots, the plants, the driftwood, those aren't just decoration. They're conflict resolution infrastructure. But the environment is only the stage. The real drama happens in the social structure underneath it. Most aquarium fish don't just coexist randomly. They build hierarchies. And those hierarchies are doing a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to preventing lethal fights. In captive groups of Mozambique tilapia, researchers found that clear rank orders established themselves around the time of sexual maturity and stayed relatively stable over weeks. Once the pecking order was set, fish didn't need to keep fighting to prove anything. The hierarchy did the work for them. Aggression shifted from injury-level attacks to what researchers call maintenance behavior. Brief chases, quick bites, posturing, just enough to remind everyone of their place. And the loser's role in all of this is actually fascinating. Studies on cooperative cichlids show that subordinate fish don't just get beaten into submission. They actively learn to submit. They approach dominance with specific postures. They retreat on cue. They engage in what researchers call passive coping. And that behavior and that willingness to signal, "I'm not a threat," is what keeps the tank from becoming a bloodbath. Your fish isn't being peaceful because it's gentle. It's being strategic. It's calculating that escalating the fight isn't worth the cost. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting, because not all fish in your tank are playing the same game. Personality is real in fish, and it matters more than most people realize. Large-scale studies on zebrafish and Atlantic salmon have identified something researchers call a bold shy spectrum. Bold individuals are more likely to initiate attacks, more likely to win contests, more likely to keep pushing. Shy individuals actively avoid escalation, and these aren't temporary moods. They're stable personality traits that persist over time. So in your tank right now, you probably have a bully and a peacekeeper, maybe more than one of each, and they're not randomly assigned those roles. They were born into them, shaped by their early environment, and reinforced by every interaction they've had since. But here's the twist. Winning changes the winner. In cichlids, a single victory boosts androgen levels, testosterone-like hormones, and dramatically increases the chance of winning the next fight. Researchers call this the winner effect. Your dominant fish isn't just dominant because it's bigger. It's dominant because winning made it more aggressive, more hormonally primed, more dangerous. And the loser? The loser doesn't get that hormone surge. Instead, losing makes them less willing to escalate in future encounters, which counterintuitively actually stabilizes the group. The losers self-select out of dangerous confrontations. The hierarchy holds. Nobody dies. Now, before we get to the one that's genuinely going to shock you, I want to mention something real quick. This channel is working toward 1,000 subscribers, and to celebrate when we hit that milestone, I'm doing $100 in Amazon gift card giveaways. One winner picked randomly from subscribers who comment on the channel. So if you want to be in the running, subscribe and drop a comment. I'll announce the winner once we hit that number. Okay, back to your fish. Let's talk about something your fish is doing right now that you almost certainly haven't noticed. It's peeing. Strategically, this sounds absurd, but the research is genuinely remarkable. In a species called Neolamprologus pulcher, a cooperatively breeding cichlid, scientists found that fish increase their urination rate when they see a rival. And that urine isn't just waste, it's a message. In experiments using perforated barriers, small fish would retreat when they could smell the urine of a larger fish, even without seeing them. But when the chemical signal was blocked, they attacked. The urine was doing the threat assessment for them. It was telling them, this opponent is bigger, stronger, not worth the risk. Researchers reviewing cichlid chemical communication have found that urine signals dominance, reproductive status, and individual identity. It's essentially a social ID card dissolved in water. Your fish are reading each other's chemistry constantly, making decisions about whether to fight, submit, or ignore, all based on information invisible to you. And it gets even more nuanced. Studies on juvenile Nile tilapia showed that when chemical signals from tank mates were introduced into the water, aggressive confrontations actually decreased. The fish recognized each other chemically, and that recognition alone was enough to calm things down. In a tank, you're not just managing space and food, you're managing a chemical conversation you can't hear or smell. But chemical signals aren't the only invisible layer. Your fish are also watching each other's social lives. Researchers studying male Siamese fighting fish, bettas, found something that sounds almost human. When a male betta has an audience watching him fight, he fights harder, he escalates more, he performs. And when one betta in a pair had been primed by seeing an audience beforehand, his opponent ramped up aggression to match him, even though the opponent had no audience exposure himself. The aggression spread socially, through observation alone. This is what scientists call the audience effect, and it means your tank has social dynamics you're not accounting for. Who can see whom? Who is watching which confrontation? The layout of your tank isn't just about territory. It's about sightlines, social information, and who feels observed. A separate study looked at 8 different cichlid species from Lake Tanganyika and tested them with mirror images. All 8 attacked their reflection and escalated over time. But the species differed dramatically in how much overt aggression they used. Some were far more restrained than their mirror behavior suggested, which means mirror aggression tests, the kind people use to assess how aggressive a fish is, can actually overestimate how dangerous a fish will be in a real social situation. Your betta attacking its reflection doesn't necessarily mean it'll kill a tank mate. Now here's the part that genuinely rewires how you think about fish. Some of them have built entire social systems specifically designed to avoid lethal conflict, not through peace, but through cooperation. Certain cichlid species, Neolamprologus bifasciatus and Neolamprologus pulcher, are the most studied, live in what researchers describe as miniature villages. There's a breeding pair at the center, and surrounding them are multiple non-breeding subordinates. These helpers don't challenge for dominance. They help. They defend the nest, they maintain the territory, they contribute to the group's survival, and in exchange, they get shelter and protection. The subordinates in these groups show something remarkable. They use submissive displays constantly, not because they're defeated, but because submission is their currency. They're buying safety and membership with behavior instead of fighting for it. And it works. The group channels its energy into defense against outside threats rather than internal destruction. Research has also shown that early social environment shapes how socially competent these fish become as adults. Cichlids raised in more complex early social groups developed better social competence, the ability to read situations and adjust their behavior accordingly, which reduces unnecessary aggression later in life. Your fish's childhood, in a very real sense, affects how dangerous it becomes. But perhaps the most surprising piece of all this is what fish do with their own young, and each other's. Fish can smell family. Multiple studies have confirmed kin recognition in fish via chemical cues, and individuals are measurably less aggressive toward relatives. This reduces within-family conflict and cannibalism in ways that pure instinct couldn't explain. In a species called Pelvicachromis pulcher, the Crebensis cichlid, non-breeding adults will normally consume young fish on sight. But once they enter reproductive state, something switches. Both sexes dramatically suppress fry eating and can even provide care for young that aren't their own. Parental mode overrides predatory mode, and convict cichlids take this even further. Young convict cichlids use odor trails to locate guarding parents, and they can merge with broods guarded by other adults, not their own parents, other adults. And those adults accept them. This is alloparental brood amalgamation, and it means that even in a tank, fish are running complex social calculations about who to protect, who to tolerate, and who to attack. Genetic research on colonial cichlids in Lake Tanganyika found that most nests contained fry that were genetically unrelated to the resident pair. Parents were deliberately transporting some of their offspring to other nests, essentially spreading the risk of predation. And foster parents accepted unrelated fry because more fry in the nest diluted the predation pressure on their own offspring. This is not simple behavior, this is strategy. Even in Amazon mollies, a species that reproduces clonally, meaning the fish are essentially genetic copies of each other, females still direct more aggression toward non-sisters than toward sisters. Even when you remove almost all genetic variation, the kin-biased aggression remains. The instinct runs that deep. So here's what's actually happening in your tank. Your fish aren't refusing to kill each other out of some peaceful nature. They're running a constant cost-benefit analysis. They're reading chemical signals in the water. They're tracking who's watching. They're remembering who won last time and what that did to their hormones. They're using submission as currency, cooperation as strategy, and chemistry as language. The glass box you've built isn't a peaceful place. It's a negotiation table, and your fish are negotiating every single moment of every single day, using tools that took millions of years to develop in a space you set up on a weekend. The decor you chose matters. The group size you picked matters. Who can see whom matters. And the fish you thought were just getting along are actually running one of the most sophisticated social systems in the animal kingdom, right there in your living room. One last thing before you go. As I mentioned earlier, this channel is working toward 1,000 subscribers, and I'm running $100 in Amazon gift card giveaways to celebrate when we hit that milestone. Everyone who's subscribed and left a comment is automatically in the running, no extra step needed. If you enjoyed this one, hit subscribe, drop your take in the comments, and I'll see you in the next episode.